What if the moment that could destroy your life became the very moment that revealed who you truly are? Most people think courage is loud, but real courage is often silent. It begins the second you decide that protecting the truth matters more than protecting yourself. The choice you make in that single moment can change not only your own life, but the lives of countless strangers you'll never meet. Before we continue, here's a small request. If you're enjoying this story, please like, follow, and subscribe to stay connected and never miss a new story. The man who refused to stay silent. Ethan Brooks had never imagined that anyone would remember his name. He was an ordinary maintenance technician working in a large manufacturing company on the outskirts of Chicago. Every morning before sunrise, he unlocked the service entrance, inspected heavy machinery, cleaned work areas, and repaired equipment that everyone else ignored until it stopped working. Most employees barely noticed him. Managers walked past him without making eye contact, and many workers didn't even know his last name. Ethan never complained because he believed honest work had its own dignity. He lived in a small apartment with his elderly mother, whose health had slowly declined over the years. Every paycheck mattered. After paying rent, medical bills, groceries, and electricity, there was rarely enough money left for anything else. Still, Ethan considered himself fortunate because he had a stable job and could take care of the only family he had left. One freezing evening, while inspecting an unused storage warehouse after a machine malfunction, Ethan noticed several crates that had been marked with official safety labels. Something about them felt unusual. Curious, he checked the inventory records and discovered that the serial numbers didn't match the company's database. At first, he assumed it was a simple paperwork mistake, but over the next few weeks, he quietly paid closer attention. What he uncovered shocked him. Senior executives had secretly approved the use of cheap, low-quality materials instead of certified safety components. The products looked identical from the outside, but inside they were dangerously defective. Those products were already being shipped to hospitals, schools, apartment buildings, and construction companies across the country. Ethan realized that if even a few of those parts failed, innocent people could lose their lives. His hands trembled as he closed the files. He wanted to believe there had been some misunderstanding, yet every document he checked confirmed the same terrible truth. This wasn't negligence. It was deliberate fraud carried out for enormous profits. For days, Ethan barely slept. Every night, he stared at the ceiling, asking himself the same question. Should he remain silent and protect the job that kept his family alive? Or should he expose the truth and risk losing everything? His closest co-worker warned him not to interfere. Powerful people always protect themselves, he whispered. You'll be the one they blame. Even his neighbors advised him to forget what he had seen. They reminded him that ordinary people never win against wealthy corporations with expensive lawyers and political influence. Their words filled Ethan with fear because deep inside he knew they were probably right. He imagined losing his income, his apartment, and his mother's medical treatment. He imagined being called a liar by people who had once trusted him. The future suddenly looked frightening, and for the first time in his life, he seriously considered pretending he had never discovered anything at all. But every time he closed his eyes, another thought returned. Somewhere, a child might walk into a building made with those defective materials. Somewhere, a family might trust a product that had already been designed to fail. Ethan realized that remaining silent wouldn't make him innocent. It would simply make him another person who allowed the truth to disappear because fear felt easier than responsibility. That realization changed everything. The following Monday morning, before leaving for work, Ethan carefully copied every document, every shipment record, every maintenance report, every internal email, and every piece of evidence he had collected over several weeks. He placed everything inside a plain brown envelope, took one deep breath, locked the apartment door behind him, and quietly walked toward the Federal Investigation Office, knowing that once he stepped through those doors, his old life might never return again. Ethan sat quietly inside the investigation office for nearly 3 hours, answering every question with complete honesty. He handed over the envelope containing the evidence and signed his statement, fully aware that there was no turning back. Within days, the company discovered that confidential documents had reached federal investigators. An internal investigation began, but instead of admitting the truth, the executives searched for someone to blame. It didn't take long before Ethan was called into the director's office. Without allowing him to explain, They accused him of violating company policy, damaging the company's reputation, and leaking confidential information. His security badge was taken away, and he was escorted out of the building where he had worked faithfully for more than 12 years. As he walked through the parking lot carrying nothing but a small cardboard box filled with his personal belongings, dozens of coworkers watched from the windows. Some looked away in silence, afraid of being seen supporting him. Others believed the rumors that he had betrayed the company for money. That evening, Ethan returned home and quietly told his mother that he had lost his job. She listened without interrupting, then gently held his hand and said, "If you lost your job because you chose honesty, then you haven't failed. You've protected something far more valuable than a paycheck." Her words gave him strength, but the months that followed were the hardest of his life. Bills continued to arrive, savings slowly disappeared, and several job applications were rejected after employers heard about the controversy surrounding his name. There were days when Ethan questioned whether he had made the right decision. He watched people who had lied continue living comfortably while he struggled to buy groceries. Yet despite everything, he never once considered taking back his statement. Nearly 8 months later, the investigation reached its conclusion. Experts confirmed that the company had knowingly used defective materials in thousands of products. Millions of unsafe items were immediately recalled before they could cause widespread tragedy. Several senior executives were arrested, enormous financial penalties were imposed, and strict safety regulations were introduced to prevent similar crimes in the future. Investigators later admitted that if Ethan had remained silent for only a few more months, the consequences could have been catastrophic. News channels across America began telling the story of the quiet maintenance worker whose courage had protected countless lives. Reporters searched everywhere until they finally found Ethan repairing bicycles in a small neighborhood workshop. He hadn't become wealthy. He hadn't written a book or accepted expensive interviews. He was simply working honestly once again. During one interview, a young journalist asked him, "After everything you've been through, if you could go back and change your decision, would you?" Ethan smiled for a moment before answering, "No. Fear only controls you while you're making the decision. Once you've chosen what's right, fear slowly disappears. But if I had stayed silent, I would have carried that regret for the rest of my life." His answer spread across television stations, newspapers, and social media. Thousands of people wrote letters thanking him. Some admitted that his story had inspired them to speak up about wrongdoing in their own workplaces. Others said that because of him, they finally understood that courage doesn't always wear a uniform or stand behind a podium. Sometimes it wears an old work shirt, carries a toolbox, and quietly refuses to compromise its conscience. A year later, the city honored Ethan with a Community Integrity Award. Standing before a crowded auditorium, he accepted the award with the same humility that had defined his entire life. Looking across the audience, he said, "Please don't remember me because I was brave. Remember that every ordinary person will one day face a moment when doing the right thing becomes uncomfortable. In that moment, don't ask yourself what is easiest. Ask yourself what kind of person you want to become." The audience rose to its feet in a long-standing ovation, not because Ethan had become famous, but because they recognized something rare, a man who had chosen character over comfort. Years passed, and although new headlines replaced old ones, Ethan's story never completely disappeared. It was shared in schools, discussed in leadership seminars, and remembered by people who needed the courage to make difficult decisions. His greatest achievement was never the award he received or the recognition he earned. It was the countless lives that remained safe because one ordinary man refused to let fear silence his conscience. When Ethan grew old, he often walked through the same neighborhoods where children played safely, families laughed together, and workers returned home to their loved ones. No one around them realized that their ordinary, peaceful lives had once depended on a decision made by someone they had never met. Ethan never asked for their gratitude because he believed the greatest reward was knowing that he had remained faithful to his values when it mattered most. As the sun set on another ordinary evening, he smiled quietly, knowing that while money can disappear, jobs can be replaced, and reputations can change, a clear conscience remains with a person forever. And perhaps that is life's greatest success, not being remembered for power or wealth, but for choosing truth when silence would have been easier. His journey ended not with applause, but with peace in his heart, and that peace became the legacy he left behind for generations to come. The true measure of a person is not what they gain by doing the right thing, but what they are willing to lose in order to protect the truth. Every person will eventually face a moment when honesty demands a price. Some will protect their comfort, while others will protect their character. Long after success, wealth, and titles are forgotten, the world continues to remember those who had the courage to stand for what was right. In the end, Ethan wasn't extraordinary because he never felt fear. He was extraordinary because he refused to let fear decide who he would become. And that is why his story lived on, quietly inspiring others to choose truth over silence, one courageous decision at a time. This is the end of the story,